Alright, so I've got another NPC upgrade build for you guys today, and today we're looking at Ayre's Echo AC. Now, what are the main issues with this build? Well, put simply, it almost feels like there were two different teams of people working on this AC, and they had different goals in mind for what this build was trying to achieve. For example, the weapon set feels like a mid-range poke, sort of kite keep away style build, just meant to spam away your opponent and kill them at a distance. The internals, on the other hand, feel like a hyper-aggressive, stay in the opponent's face, and just aggro your opponent down sort of build, right? Because these internals and weapons just simply don't work together, and it is the primary issue with the build in my opinion. Now, for upgrading this build, I've set myself with one primary limitation. That's Research Institute parts only, right? Given the nature of what Ayre is and how she can control her AC, I decided that was kind of the most I was willing to sort of compromise and keep it kind of like, I don't know, in theme, more accurate, right? Now, so what have I done? Well, first I've switched out the Nebula Redshift for the standard Nebula. This is mostly just because the standard Nebula is just better at a distance, right? It's got a bigger hitbox on the charge shot, and the charge shot also has a bigger radius, right? And that's really it. It's just a bit better at mid-range in my opinion. Next, of course, I've switched out the internals. This is the primary place where the build has been changed and upgraded. Get rid of that close range FCS, get rid of the gills, and give her, the more appropriate, sort of more kite-focused Research Institute internals, right? And yeah, that's really all there is to say about the build. The limitations on it have kind of left me with, honestly, a build in my opinion that is still not all that good, right? A lot of the Research Institute parts are really good by themselves, but don't really work all that well together, in my opinion, funnily enough, right? Because the way I would describe Ayre's build is that every single part individually is good. Together, they're terrible, right? But yeah, I think that's enough talking about it. Let's go ahead and get into the details. Alright, now first we've got the Nebula, and I was actually quite hesitant to switch this from the Nebula Redshift. But since it's also a Research Institute weapon, and it is technically just the plasma version of the Coral Rifle, I decided it was in theme enough to make the change. And the big reason for this change is going to be for the charge shots. As this build is a sort of mid-range, sort of poke, keep away build, the extra, hitbox, the extra size on the hitbox on the charge shot of the plasma rifle, and the bigger AoE just simply makes it more consistent at range, right? Obviously, the big advantage that the Coral Rifle, the Redshift, has over the regular Nebula is that its damage is much faster, right? It's much more instant, right? Meanwhile, with the Nebula, your opponent has to stay in the blast radius for quite a good amount of time to get all the damage, right? But it just simply doesn't outweigh the extra consistency that the Nebula brings to the table, in my opinion. So I decided to make this switch, again, just for extra consistency at mid-range. Next, we've got the Moonlight Redshift, right? Similar to the Coral, the Nebula Redshift, it's just a sort of slight stat tweak of the regular Moonlight, pretty much. Obviously, the regular Moonlight has better charge attacks, and the Redshift has better, non-charged attacks. And there just wasn't really a reason to change this. It fits well enough with her playstyle. It's certainly not the best melee weapon in the game, and it can be fairly inconsistent, especially if you're not using it solely for direct hits. But no real reason to change this. Next, we've got the Coral Missile Launcher, and this weapon is still pretty good even after the nerfs it got a while back. It still does a lot of damage and a lot of impact with the charge shot. Now, it is obviously quite slow, but this is actually kind of works out in its advantage. This thing can track for a very, very long time, put a lot of pressure on your opponent. And again, it's still pretty good, and there isn't really an alternative here, right? I suppose technically, like I think the Aurora. Yeah, I could technically use like the Aurora if I really wanted to, since it's a Research Institute weapon, but I decided to just keep her missile, right? And then finally, we've got the Coral Shield. Of course, I wasn't going to change this. The Coral Shield is the one type of shield I do actually really like, just in general, because you can use the left-hand weapon while it's deployed. Obviously, in the case of the melee weapon, like we have in this case, it doesn't matter, but if we were using a more, gun-style weapon, or just a gun, right? We're using a gun, could have the shield up while firing the gun, but yeah, there was just no reason to change it. And there is another Research Institute shield, obviously, so I just left it alone. That's all there is to say about the weapons. Now let's move on into the frame. Now, I haven't made any changes here, so there isn't really much to talk about. And since I also decided to limit myself to only Research Institute parts in this build, it doesn't leave me with many options either, right? Because it's basically just the Ephemera core set and the HAL 826 set, right? And I just thought I'd quickly go over why I didn't switch to any of the HAL parts for this build. And basically, for most parts, just like none of them provide enough of a benefit to really justify switching out, to, you know, getting rid of the visual appearance of the Ephemera set for the stats, right? Like the HAL 826 set head is pretty similar, sort of defensively, and it's lighter, right? But it's not enough to make a difference. Also, less kinetic defense, which the build is already low on. So, you know, or a more kinetic defense, which the build is already low on, which could be nice, but again, not enough to make a big difference. Next, we've got the core, right? And the HAL 826 core is just simply too heavy for the Ephemera legs in this case. So it wasn't a choice to begin with. It is what it is. Now, moving on, of course, we've got the arms. The arms in this case, again, similar, just not a good enough reason to switch this out. Obviously, the HAL 826 arms has better firearm specialization, but with the, you know, the good FCS we have, it's not enough to really matter in any significant way. So decided not to do it. And of course, the HAL 826 legs. Honestly, you could probably justify this pretty well. It is a pretty sizable loss of boost speed, but not so much that it's really going to hinder the build in a significant way. And you would get quite a good extra bit of attitude stability, extra 101 attitude stability, which is, you know, a pretty sizable amount, and a good amount of extra defenses as well. But again, I just didn't feel like it was worth it, right? So I decided to leave the frame alone as is. Now let's move on into the internals. Now for the internals, I really do feel like some of the initial choices for the internals here were just simply made so that at least a NPC uses the parts, right? So sorry to the boost here. First, the original here is the gills. Now I switched this out for the NGI 001. And obviously the main thing here is just simply that the NGI 001 is more suited for a mid-range sort of poke keep away build than the gills are, right? You know, less upward thrust, less boost speed, less assault boost speed, better assault boost consumption, of course, but less speed. So the NGI 001 just makes more sense as a keep away thruster. And I really do feel like the main reason she has the gills on is just to differentiate her from the HAL 826 in terms of her internals, because you might have noticed, I'm pretty sure this is the exact same set of internals that the HAL 826 uses. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Because, you know, moving on, of course, we got the FCS, where I switched to the double LT001 for the, of course, much superior medium range assist, because this is a mid-range build, not a close range build. And the massive close range assist and terrible medium range assist is very much not good for this build. Also, this has better missile lock correction. Personally, if I was going to allow myself to use literally any FCS in the game, I would probably use either one of these. Probably this one, to be honest. Probably this one, actually. You know, a little less missile lock correction, but better medium range assist. This is what I would probably use if I was going to optimize this as much as possible. But keeping myself to the Research Institute parts, the double LT001 is just far better for this build. And of course, the generator, the AGI 000 hasn't changed. The aorta just simply can't generate enough energy for the build, so there was no real choice there. And so the NGI 000 it is. And yeah, that's all there is to say about the build. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And before we get to the background footage, a quick thank you to our members. As always, any amount of money you guys you know, I guess donate to me for the membership, which you do get, you know, some perks for. If you give me $10 or more to Purple Cat tier or higher, you do get to see the videos early. But yeah, as always, thanks for the support. I really appreciate it. Now let's go ahead and move on into the gameplay footage.
Code 31C, we've taken critical damage.
Updating your marker data. Proceed in the direction indicated. You see that? That's the Watchpoint's control center. The target's inside. Make your way in. Is that Sula?
Pitiful dog. I feel sorry for you. I really do. You may have survived a little longer. If only you had a different master.
C1249. Sula. He's an independent mercenary who survived first-gen augmentation. Don't think twice, 621. Kill him before he kills you. Back to work. Penetrate the control center and destroy the target. There. Destroy the device in the center.
Who are you? An older type of augmented human, 4th generation. Have we made contact? I am Ayre, a Rubiconian. Please, you must wake up. Before your consciousness is forever scattered in the coral flow.
Augmented human C4621. Vital signs confirmed. Disabling autopilot. Establishing comms link with him.
Raven. I've identified an approaching enemy. I'll synchronize with your brainwaves and maintain contact to support you. Main system, reactivating combat mode. I've looked into the enemy craft. It's an autonomous PCA craft, Valteus. You'll have to break its pulse armor to inflict meaningful damage. Picking up a massive heat signature. Evasive action, Raven. Pulse armor down. Now's your chance, Raven. Taking your comms link offline for now. That massive... The waves are intensifying. Raven, get clear.
AP at 50%. Two repair kits remaining.
Systems down. It's silent. Raven. You need rest. But first, a warning. The coral surge you were swept up in? That was just a glimpse. A premonition of the storm of flame that will burn Rubicon.